All right, all right, all right. SEL and EDU family. I cannot wait to get into this episode right here. This one gonna be one pages, honey. I'm just saying. Krista, how you how you doing?
Already starting to laugh. We just came off of recording one episode where I said to Craig, like, do you know anybody who sucks? Like everybody that you introduced me to just blows me away. And I'm spiraling in this whole big learning, like aha moments. And not to put the pressure on our guests or anything, but I'm thinking it's going to happen again. So no pressure or anything, but I'm ready to have these like great aha moments and just it'll change my whole view of education.
It might turn into a bah ha 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 moments.
Is that a dad joke? Is Ming bringing dad jokes into this right now?
I think I just did the first one, so this is the challenge. Can you all up your dad joke game for this episode?
This is welcome to SEL in EDU podcast, where we put out the dad jokes and we talk about baking and cooking. And by the way, education and teacher well-being and student. Craig, how are you?
This is this is such a day. Okay. I just so for podcast listeners who are like, what in the world is happening? This is y'all are a little weird right now. It's okay. Like navigate with us. It's all right. It's all right.
Our guests are also the hosts of a podcast. They're the hosts of Educator Happy Hour podcast. And I met Ming Shelby during the whole COVID thing. We talked about this on your podcast in Clubhouse. And we just kind of connected. It was on SEL Day. You were hosting something. You're like, hey, do you want to jump in?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And we just clicked. I'm like, oh my, this woman is amazing. And she does it all while raising twins, which I don't know how you do this. I have been in awe of you. And then you introduced me to Chase and I'm like, oh my, we need to have you both on. So SEL and EDU family, you have got 4 of us on, but let me introduce you to our guest. Ming Shelby is a TEDx speaker and national board certified educator who has dedicated her career to inspiring students, teachers, and administrators through positive learning experiences. She believes that courage is the critical ingredient for personal transformation. Ming also hosts the podcast Courage Up, where she shares stories of courage so people can learn to thrive, not just survive. Chase Mielke is an award-winning educator, writer, and speaker focusing on preventing teacher burnout and increasing student engagement. And one of his quotes that I love is, you can't be effective without being affective. And so Chase and Ming, we are so happy to have you with us. I'm going to throw this out to both of you and just see what happens when you both unmute, but how are your hearts today?
I'm pulling a nose, goes. Ming, you first.
I thought you would go first. Did you notice how that was the quietest we've been on the podcast so far?
Well, Ming thinks I'll dive in.
I love this about Chase. He doesn't like awkward silence.
So what's on my heart and where I'm at right now is like I have yesterday, and I was sending him a message to Ming. I have like 3 massive projects that came to my mind of like things I want to do. And I had a moment where I was like, I'm not even finished with the current project I'm on, and I'm getting excited about these other things. And so my heart feels like kind of frantic of just like all these ideas. There's so much I want to get done, but also that moment of I probably need to focus on just one thing at a time as I remind myself. So it's good, but it's definitely something that needs the reins taken in.
Focusing on one thing is totally overrated, Chase, especially for for people like us.
I was going to say, I'm still learning how to do that. So if you have any pointers, share them.
Thank you. On Monday, I started the job fair recruitment extravaganza that this time of year brings. So we went to our first one, and I love doing job fairs because one, I get to just say how great education is now, even though sometimes we have our ups and downs. But what I love the most, where they are just like so excited for changing the world, or like, it's just like, you just look at them and they have excitement, wonder. They're like, I can't wait to have my first classroom. I can't wait to impact my first group of students. They just are like so excited to make a difference and make an impact with students. And so I love just being in that space.
Chase, I know you talk about teacher burnout and maybe about being around that enthusiasm of new people coming into novice teachers. And, I think about where I was 24 years ago and almost to the point probably where somebody needed to rein me back in and be like, you need to be realistic. Going to change the world. And this was also true disclosure around the time of like Dangerous Minds and Freedom Writers and kids don't need to be saved, right? You're not a savior for kids. But how can I help empower students to become their best selves and support them in their learning journey? And so I wonder, what are you seeing in some of our novice teachers and has that energy reinvigorated you? And Chase, along those same lines, how does that relate to then your work around teacher burnout and what happens when we start off as so excited and just ready to get out there and make a difference, and then we end up on that other side?
That's a great question.
So I think the evolution of my work around burnout very much started in focusing on the individual of like, what are the individual skills, strategies rooted in research that we can apply? Because that was like my life is I was burning out, and thankfully I knew a lot of the research around positive psychology and just human motivation in general. I leaned on those strategies hard. But then in getting a chance to work with hundreds of schools across the US over the past few years, it's the realization that it's not the individual's fault, it's the system. And there are many factors within educational school systems that make it hard for people to not get burned out. And so I think a lot about like how much focus goes into like, oh, these young teachers, and we tell them things like, oh, like, don't get too exuberant, don't get too excited, when it's like we're blaming them for the fact that they're running into these walls within the system. So rather than focusing the energy on like, how do we remove some of those barriers and those walls that exhaust teachers and don't support them and give them autonomy, we instead just try to like throw it all on the person. Like, you need to manage yourself and your own energy, when that's a very incomplete picture of what's actually happening in so many schools.
I have a different experience than what Chase is describing. And so this is where we go. So I think like as a first year teacher, you think like, I student taught, I did all this, I'm going to go out, I have everything that I need. And the reality is when we're starting and I can only speak as a gen ed classroom teacher because that's my experience. There are so many things that we don't have that we're not ready for. And I was really, really lucky that I was part of a district that was a model PLC district. I had amazing teammates that helped me, supported me. And so when, bills come, like we joke around in the office, like, okay, it's not the kid's fault, it's the teacher's fault. It's not the teacher's fault, it's the principal's fault. It's not the principal's fault, it's central office. It's not central office, it's the county, the state, the legislator. Like you can play the blame game and go up the hierarchy as far as you want. And I just felt really lucky that I had this amazing team. We were so passionate about the work we were doing. Was it exhausting? Were there times that we're like, what is this all for? Does this even matter? But I remember us just like working together so closely that we were really clear on what our values as a team was, what we would allow as a team, what we wouldn't allow. I remember us inviting the superintendent coming to talk to us because our school was multi-age, and we're like, here's why we're so passionate about it. Here's where we see this going. Does this align with the vision of the district? And so like, it was just really rejuvenating. I just feel really lucky that I had that great team. I don't know if I would have the same experience in education of wanting to continue without that core team. And so while Chase is like, yes, I get the whole systems, I think the people that you're surrounded by make the biggest impact and the biggest difference.
All right, now I'm not sure whether or not this is the happy hour, because I'm like, this is this is impressive. So I guess one of the tensions that I'm observing. So I just transitioned out of my full-time role as an executive director and superintendent last July, and I when you have carried a community co-carried. It wasn't just me. It was never just I. It was always the entire community, but leading the community through pandemics and more, and now being on the other side where I'm a full-time entrepreneur, I could see the essence of what you're sharing, Ming, about the power in teaming and knowing that folks are wrestling through, very ever-changing waters in regards to the state of education. And depending on where you are, you have all these political fights about what is best for young people. And rarely do we just talk to the young people in the classrooms about how are they experiencing it all. And so I'm just curious for both of you as you either support, counsel, and engage with educators who are looking at social media that seems to be the temperature gauge for the state of education at this time. How do you keep teachers inspired to stay the course and do this work and live into the call when burnout is real? Like I could much more about myself versus staying the course and answering the call of being a teacher who is a rainbow in somebody's class. So what are your thoughts about that?
Hire Chase Mielke and come speak at your Institute Day, which is what I did.
There's the plug. There's the mending right there. There are a number of things that you brought up, Craig, that I think are worth noting. Number one is I advise a lot of folks to be cautious of using social media as the barometer of how education and society and schools are, because like how those are designed is to create algorithms that get more views and get more spotlight. And so to some extent, we have to be mindful of what we're exposing ourselves to in terms of assessing like what is really happening in my life and in my world. I talk a lot about building what I call a burnout immune system. And it's kind of that reality of like, we're never going to get rid of all the bad and all the challenge and all the struggle and strife. But what we can do is we can build up our immune system so that like when we do have challenging moments or we are seeing other educators who, like hate the job and want to be done, we at least have enough positive experiences, positive relationships, autonomy, competence within our skill set that we can look back and say like, yep, even though that is bad, I at least know what my skills and ability and purpose are. And I think it's that moment of being real and authentic that education is really freaking hard sometimes. And it doesn't come with the most notoriety and just like praise as we would like. But if we look down at the facts of how we impact lives and what we care about and how we utilize those skills, like it's kind of that like inward draw and trying to build from the inside out rather than expecting, like social media to fix it or expecting all these things. So I know that's kind of a dichotomy to what I said earlier of like, we know the systems are struggling, but it's almost like we have to turn inwardly first to really draw that as our source of moving forward.
I'm hearing what you're saying too, because we can't always change the system right away. But what we can change, what was within our locus of control, is our response and kind of our instincts and the coping mechanisms that we develop that can help us then start to build some allyship to start dismantling some of those pieces of the system that are hurtful. Yeah, I hear what you said. You mentioned it may be counter, but it makes a lot of sense thinking about how you're surviving within that system.
Yeah, because it comes down to, I talk a lot about agency and advocacy. Those are the two moves. So you have your inward agency of focusing on what you can control. And if you can't have direct control, then how do you use advocacy to try to create some of those changes, even on a small scale around you? I think for some people, they have to make that decision of like, okay, do I need a break? Do I need to step away from this exact role of education? And how do I also shift how I view my work? That education and teaching aren't always synonymous, that there's a lot we can do to support educational systems and empower lives. That don't mean we have to stick in the same role, same situation, if it really is us running against a wall and burning ourselves out.
This is going to sound so cheesy and corny. I am a strong believer finding the joy in these little moments. And Sean Acor, who is also a positive psychologist, he talks about like gratitudes or journaling a positive moment, the doubler, and revisiting that. And I just remember like we're planning something really fun and exciting, like this is going to come up and I can't wait to teach it to students. And you're there and you're like, look at the joy on their faces. And it's just incredible. And we're one of the schools that I support. They're doing like March Madness book tournament right now. So I was a guest reader to see if like the book would go on to the next level. I walked in and the teachers were like, so solemn, like real. I'm like, what's happening? And the light was turned off in the room. And I'm like, you have kids in front of you who are like so excited to read. And so it's like, you don't have to be happy and smiling like every moment of every day. But I think it's just like appreciating those small things. And so I know that can come across like really naive. I also think like we're so lucky that we get to work with students that no other profession are we directly impacting the future. And so, and we've talked about this, like, what's the value? Like we're shifting to our focus. So that's how I
Mm.
see it. And maybe people are like, it's like so rose-colored glasses, Pollyanna. And of course, there's like hard moments too, right? We all have
Mm.
these hard moments, but it's like how we frame it. And Chase talks about that too, the finite mindset.
A lot of what you're sharing has me think about why Abbott Elementary has been such a prolific
Mm.
time, right? And shout out to Quinta Brunson, who has created such a masterpiece that is fun, it's accessible to folks. It really has drawn a lot of conversations about like, is this really what the classroom looks like on a day-to-day? Is this how schools run? Is this really how realistic is this? And so I think about the fact that we don't see as many of those fun moments show up in our social media.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm being honest, and
Mm-hmm.
when I think Chase about what you're talking about, recentering on what's important, what's within your power. I mean, you talk about the beauty of community and working and navigating all the things that happen, but doing this in community and knowing that those folks represent something so great when you're trying to do this immense work of changing young people's lives through the power of education. I am curious about what has been one of the most inspiring stories or conversations you've had, I guess maybe in the last, few months or year that keeps you continuing to have these conversations.
This is so interesting. This is good, Craig. Okay. So actually, Chase, you've heard this story. So I worked in a previous district as an instructional coach, and I worked with this teacher who teaches middle school English. And a couple months ago, I got an email from our webmaster that was like, hi, Ming. I don't know if you remember me. She reached out to me. I haven't spoken to her in 5 years. She was like, I'm not sure if like this is for me. I'm not quite sure where I'm going. Like, can we talk? And so I'm like, here's my number. Of course I remember you. Like, let's get together. Let's talk. What's going on? And so we got together. This is going to be a longer story than I anticipated. And she was like, the kids are different. This is really hard. I really can't do my seventh and eighth period blocks. Like, they don't care about education. One kid came in and said, I hate this class. And I told him, like, you're really hurting my feelings. That's so disrespectful to me. That's so disrespectful to the class. Like, why are you saying things like that? She's like, parents don't care, Ming. I'm calling them. No one's calling me back. Like, I just can't do this. And so I listened to her. We went through some coaching conversations. And eventually I just said, you're making this about you. She's
Mm.
like, what? And I'm like, you're taking it personally. And she's like, it is personal. I'm like, it's not about you. And I just had to be really direct. And she's like, oh my gosh. I felt like I just like smacked her in the face, and she's like, it's not about me. And so we debriefed and talked about what does that mean when what information are you getting when the kid says, I don't want to come to class? What information are you getting when parents aren't calling you back? Could it be they had a bad experience in school? Is it about you or is it about their current circumstances? And after talking to her, she was like, I just needed a mindset reframe. I just needed to shift. And like, I just continued following up with texts with her, like, how are you doing? She's like, I am so much better. She's a better educator for her students, for her family. Things were not going well at home either as a result of it. And so what started out as like a really morose conversation was actually pretty uplifting at the end, where she felt like energized and rejuvenated to go back. And it's February in the Midwest and there's snow, even though it's 70 degrees today. This is not the best time of year for us, but that was really inspiring to me when we hold our colleagues that warmth, candor, that we can make a difference and they can make a difference for students. So that's my story. At 35 minutes later.
I love that. So what came to mind, Ming, and kind of stemming off of that is like, I was thinking as you're telling this story and a lot of these conversations is I think one of the biggest paradoxes of education, teaching maybe specifically, is that in both ways, we have to take this work really seriously, but then we also sometimes take this work way too seriously. And it is knowing when there's a heavy, really important high gravity moment. We all experience those as educators, that when students are coming to us with trauma and they're coming to us with very intense needs that might even be on the curriculum, we do have a really important job, possibly the most critical job in that human being's life. But at the same time, because of that, sometimes we inflate all of these other little moments as like these major things that are a challenge to us and our entire sense of efficacy. When sometimes kids are just jerks because they're like having a bad day. And sometimes I don't need to take this personally. And on the flip side, we need to have fun and we need to have joy and stop taking some of these things more seriously than they need to be. And I think for myself personally, that's been one of the most important pieces, is knowing the skills and strategies and being able to respond when a really intense moment is there and a really high gravity, but also learn to have fun, because the things that keep me doing this work is realizing how those two both contribute to changing a life. The amount of, both with my own students, teachers I've coached, people I speak to and work with at professional development, I get people coming up to me of like, this was a really important critical moment, or this story really resonated with me. But I just as much get those responses of like, you made me feel energized to do this work. I feel joyful right now. And I think both those pieces are really important. So taking ourselves seriously, but not too seriously with some of the stuff that doesn't weigh as heavily as it should.
As I'm hearing you both speak, I'm being reminded of times back in the classroom. So I was years working with high school students and I loved it. I had no desire to leave the classroom. I was actually Craig earlier that I reconnected. I mean, we've been in touch, but with the principal that I've known for 15 years, he's now a superintendent in Pennsylvania. I just saw him today. He's the one who's like, hey, would you be interested in this coaching position? I'm like, what? But I needed the courage to try something new, because I like to stay where I'm comfortable.
Yeah.
And so when it opened up doors for me and as I was telling Craig, just the opportunities to see myself in ways that I didn't even know existed. But what I'm hearing you saying, and Ming, this goes back earlier with, it's really important who you surround yourself with. Because, and are those people bringing light into your life and joy and lifting you up and adding value? And a couple of weeks ago, Craig and I talked to one of my SEL mentors, and he was the first person who said that to me. And I looked around at some of the people I was hanging out with when I was with the district, and I'm like, this is not healthy or good. And how do I make that shift? And honestly, that was around the time that I met Craig, which was incredible. The world opened up in this way through ASCD, and I met these people who just have become my closest friends and spur me on. The hardest part is that we don't live near each other, but technology allows us to connect. And so thinking about how can we leverage and expand our networks to allow ourselves to be around people who invigorate us and find joy in what we're doing and hold on to those joyful moments. But I think also give ourselves, like, it's okay if we realize this is just not for us anymore, that there's a bigger calling or another place we can go. And I love Chase, that we can still support education in different ways, or work with kids in different ways, or support educators, but we're impacting directly too many kids if this is just not joyful for us anymore. So it leads me to, I'm going to give you a choice. You didn't give me a choice on your podcast. I'm just reminding you.
Wow,
This
she
is true.
remembers that.
This is
Yeah.
true.
This is a note I put down to come back to. So when I think,
I can't wait.
like I had my 1/5 period, we had a pot pie contest because I was talking about the way that my German grandmother makes pot pie, chicken pot pie in a pan. And one of the students was like, no, mine's better because it has a crust. And so we had a cook-off for the class one year. And then another time, one of my classes came in with silly string, and there was a silly string. I still have the ball of hardened silly string that I keep because it reminds me of playful moments. So here's your choice. You did not give me a choice on whether you asked me about an embarrassing classroom story. I don't know if you remember that. So I would love to hear, and Craig, I'd like to hear you too, either an embarrassing classroom story or a classroom moment that just filled you with joy that you want to hold on and preserve that moment because it reminds you of what you do and why you do it.
I have an embarrassing one that I can think of right off the top of my head, but I don't.
Yes, go. I want to hear that.
You might have already heard this story. So I taught kindergarten and first grade multi-age. So one of the most stressful parts of teaching that age is dismissal the first week of school, like making sure the kids get on the right transportation, whether it's like after school, bus, walker, right? Have I told you this, Krista? Is this sounding familiar or no?
It's a little familiar, but it might not be for the SEL and EDU family. So,
okay. So sweet Natalia, she's in college now, but I'm walking her out. She's a in my notes, I triple check. She's a bus rider. She's walking out of the building. And as soon as we get outside, she's like, where is this lady taking me? And she just starts yelling, Daddy, Daddy. And I'm like, Natalia, are going on the bus. And she's like, no, my daddy said he's picking me up. He said he's picking me up. And there's like rails on the bus. And she's like, Daddy, Daddy, like lashing her head. And all these parents are looking at me like, what is happening? Like, is she doing what so I just got all these looks and I was just reassured her like, Natalia, I promise, like your dad's going to be at the bus stop. You're a bus rider, all this stuff. So I finally, she's shouting. I get her on. She's in a fit. So I run back, hurry. I call the dad. Derek, this is Ming. Like I just sent Natalia on, like, please tell me you're going to be at the bus stop. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to be there. I told her I'd pick her up at the bus stop, but maybe she just heard pick her up at school. So it all worked out. But there are a lot of eyes looking at me when a 5-year-old is like trying to run away from me shouting daddy.
So, yeah. I'll share an embarrassing story. I actually use this story when I work with teachers on like cognitive chains as a part of like why mindfulness practices are really, really helpful. So I was early career teacher, single, like I had a little bit of money because I finally had a job and a guarantee I was out late the night before a school night, socializing, doing as I did. But I come into school the next day and I am not at my best physically, emotionally. And I have these timed essays for my students. I was like, this is perfect. They're just going to sit and write pretty much the whole hour. I'll be able to just turn off the lights and chill. But I knew before this, I had to do this little mini lesson. I had to like really engage them around like a writing strategy. And for whatever dumb reason, I used to do this because I was like way full of energy. I used to try to like make it more interesting by adding some accents or, just playing it up. So for whatever reason, I was doing this in a quasi-French accent. So I grab an expo marker and I paint a mustache on my face. I'm going into, I'm like, I just have to pour my energy into this. And then they're going to write their samples, essays, and we're going to be good to go. Set them loose on their essays. I'm ready to chill. And then the teacher next door bursts into my room with a bowl of candy. And she's like, I need you to watch this candy because I need to make copies and my seniors are going to try to steal it. And so I'm annoyed. I'm like, this isn't my job. Why is she interrupting my kids' essays? I'm not in a good headspace. Sure enough, some seniors come, they grab the bowl of candy, they go back in the room, and I'm irate at this point. I'm like, this is so absurd that I'm getting interrupted. My students are getting interrupted. So I burst into the room next door. Teacher's not even in there. And all these seniors are staring at me. And I was like, who took the candy? and they just keep staring. And I'm seriously, tell me who took the candy. And I've lost it at this point. And I remember saying, this is so immature that you all are taking candy and no one wants to own up to it. So I go back into my room, I storm back in, I sit down, my kids are writing. And as I'm stewing, it dawns on me why they were all staring at me. And it's because I still had the dumb French mustache drawn on my face. And so I have just told a bunch of seniors they are immature when I have a fake mustache on my face. And without even thinking, it was the first time I accidentally swore out loud in front of my students. It was like Christmas Story where I was like, oh, fudge. And I had completely lost the lesson, thought I was going to get fired. And that has stood with me forever.
Bring the mustache back. Bring the mustache back. So, Chase, did you end up finding out who took the candy?
No, I was more worried about not getting fired. I have no idea. That was like immediately email my administrator, apologize. I mean, my students thought it was hilarious. They thought it was so funny. Because I used to have a policy around swearing in my class of if you swear, you either have to donate $1 to our positive psychology fund, you can take the 30-minute detention, or you can do some push-ups. Because if you're going to have some beefy words, you have to have a beefy body. That was my policy at the time. So my kids were like, what's it going to be, Mielke? You're going to pay $1? I was like, I will pay this $1 times 5. Yeah.
So my first question though is how long did it take to get the mustache off? That's what
it wipes up. Expo markers can wipe off pretty quick, but I was like scrubbing real hard in my planning period the next time around. Yeah.
Then you end up with raw and red skin. And so
right.
I'm like,
oh, like Mr. Mielke's face is bleeding.
I'm just gonna, take all of that in. I just want to send you like some candy just to replace whatever it was. Like, I'm a Southerner, so I understand when you want to have treats around, but if it was your favorite treat, you're like, hey, I was looking for that ice cream. What's going on? Well, I'm gonna throw a question your way. It's a question that we ask all of our guests. What do you feel is your superpower at this time?
I think my superpower is perspective. That is something I think I work really hard at, trying to take perspective of no matter what the challenge is. And that's pretty much when it comes down to the core of what I do. That's a lot of what I'm supporting teachers and students of, like, what are the strategies and mindsets that can help us take a different perspective to tackle hard problems, to overcome challenges, and to ultimately like find our purpose, our happiness, and our meaning in life.
I thought of 2. This is how super I am.
Humility is one of them. Humility.
I think connection is a superpower of mine. I just love meeting new people. I love hearing people's stories. I love just connecting and like finding out like what makes people tick and what their story is. So that's really fun for me. And then I'll just leave it at that.
You're just going to leave us. You said you have 2 of them, and then you're just going to be like, oh, psych. You're never going to know the second one.
Stay tuned for next year when we're on the podcast again.
There it is. There's the loop in.
Okay, my second one. My second one is reflection. I think that I'm a pretty reflective person, and I really value like learning from each opportunity, whether it was good. Mostly I tend to go to what I could have done better in the situation, whether it was a difficult conversation, a training, an interaction, whatever it may be. But I really value reflection and continuously growing from experiences.
Ooh. Well, we both know that you're going to have to head out in a moment. So how would folks connect with you? So folks want to either be part of a conversation with you, they want to find themselves listening to more on your podcast, or, maybe say, hey, we would love to work with you. How would they go about doing that?
Yeah, one route just for the personal work that I do is by following me on all the social medias, Instagram at Chase Mielke, or going to chasemelke.com where they can learn more about the work I do. Our podcast is Educator Happy Hour, available wherever folks get podcasts. So we're always looking for people who have stories to tell and want to engage and share those stories with an educational audience.
You can find me at Ming Shelby on all things social and website. And yeah, come hang out with us too on Educator Happy Hour after you listen to SEL and EDU, and check out Krista's episode too, because she's hilarious and amazing. So shout out to her on that as well. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
We loved having Ming and Chase be part of our SEL and EDU family. We're most honored that they are joining us. You better make sure you check out their podcast. I will say that, you hold all the things you care dear and hold them tight until we come together again. Continue to stand and live and learn and breathe and thrive in the light. We love you. Y'all take care.